Boardroom Bound, Episode 41. What does good board leadership look like? With Janice Ellig.
What is your brand? What do you stand for? What are you an expert? You can't be an expert at everything. Make sure that you are known for something, whether it be cybersecurity, a financial expert, and have an impressive bio. Don't make people work to see what you're all about.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give new and aspiring directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. Today's episode, we're speaking with Janice Ellig, and she is the CEO of Ellig Group, which is one of the leading executive search firms. And she is dedicated to increasing the placement of women and diverse candidates on corporate boards and in the C-suite. And she's been incredibly successful at doing this. Her statistics are off the charts, as you'll hear about in the episode. So much so, in about the 20 years from leading that company, other leading search firms are now following, and they're still in her wake. She is one of the thought leaders in this space. And in addition to doing that, she is the founder of the Women's Forum of New York's Corporate Board Initiative and its signature event, a biennial Breakfast of Corporate Champions, which honors the companies committed to board diversity. And she'll be talking about this year's event that's coming up on November 7th in New York, and the incredible 325 companies will be being honored for the large number of corporate board diversity seats that they have filled. In addition to talking about all of that, Janice has the most incredible, succinct guide. Bang, bang, bang. Exactly what you need to do to get your board placement out there. So much that we cover in this half hour. Thrilled to jump into the show. Let's get talking. Janice Ellig, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Thank you, Alexander. Pleasure to be here with you today.
And of course, for me, it's a lot of fun because not only are you an expert on all things board, but you're a fellow podcaster, and you've got one related to this as well. So we'll tee that up as we go through, and we'll do some sharing and lessons learned about how we've been helping our audience and educate them about these important points. But that is really set up by what we're going to talk about here today, because you spend a lot of time not only helping boards fill roles, but you're a big champion for the diversity in the boardroom. So I think this will be wonderful for our audience to hear both perspectives and both sides. But just to help set this up, if you could explain a bit about your great background and how you got into the role that you're into today.
Thank you, Alexander. Yeah, I've spent, over 20 years in corporate America watching women who got to the table. They were making great money. They even had the title, but they really didn't have a voice. And so I wrote or co-authored a book, What Every Successful Woman Knows, when I was at a company that I helped take public from Citibank. And with my co-author, I saw that women really needed to move ahead. So I went into the search profession at that time. In fact, I went to a large search firm, and it didn't suit me. I needed to be at a smaller one where I could really help women move ahead and have a voice at the table. And that's when I really focused on having more women and diverse candidates, or those underrepresented executives, getting to the C-suite and into the boardroom. And that's where I am today, 19 years later. And the search firm that I'm in today is the one I started at now 19 years ago. And I'm the last standing of the four partners or owners of the firm, and now which bears my name, right, Ellig Group. But the values of the firm are still the same, and our percentages are really unparalleled against our competitors, whereby 75% of the C-suite executives we place are women in underrepresented groups, and 85% in the boardroom. So we really tap into those pools of candidates that are women and underrepresented groups, because we know that the landscape in corporate America has to be changed and represented, and it makes for more innovative companies. Because our tagline is, we are reimagining search at the Ellig Group. And we believe we're giving our clients fabulous choices of highly qualified candidates, and our slates are 95% with those underrepresented groups. So if our placement rate is that high, our candidate slates are really great, highly qualified candidates. So that's why it began what I saw in corporate America, and I said I want to make a change.
And those are amazing statistics, right? So kudos to you. That's very impressive. And it's interesting because we can stand here now almost 2 decades after you started the company with that sort of philosophy and say, well, that should be more of the normal. And it's still not normal, right? So we're still trending towards that direction. I was talking with a partner at Heidrick & Struggles, one of the other big name firms people would know. Mm-hmm. And they said, we have a firm commitment. We want every slate to be at least 50% diversity today. And you hear that and you go, that's great. And you think of the change that it came from. But you guys have clearly been leading that front and moving out there for a while, which is so wonderful to get your perspective on it. Can you give us some insight? So a lot of our audience are aspiring board members, and they're thinking, this is something I want to go down. That has probably been a very hard course for you to get some companies bought into that. I know some have been better than others, and we'll talk about your breakfast at honors companies that are good. But can you give us some perspective on the last almost 2 decades about how you got firms to recognize that?
So because we have been seen as we're a female-owned firm, right? And our stats are so high, but our results are so great. So clients come to us because they know that we are going to give them great candidates. Nobody's ever unqualified. They're always qualified. So we get the believers. Our clients know that they will be more innovative. And they also know that their employees, their consumers, their communities, and their shareholders will be looking at them in terms of who is at the top of the house in the boardroom and in the C-suite. And they will be the employer of choice. They'll be the consumers will go to them. Their communities will value them more, and their shareholders will obviously benefit. So these are the 4 legs of the stool. And so when you get companies that, the CEO knows it's the right thing to do, it's the business imperative, you don't have to convince them. And then when one CEO sees the other CEO doing it and they're benefiting from it, their colleagues, they follow each other. And I think the press also has been out there more of late saying, you don't want to be seen as the laggard. You don't want to be seen as the one who is not forging ahead. And there's so many studies out there, McKinsey, Peterson Institute, Catalyst, Deloitte. They're all showing that, greater diversity, more innovative companies, better financial performance, better reputation, employers of choice. The correlation is so strong that, companies know that that's the right thing to do. And once they get there, they don't even give it a second thought. So the boards I speak to, the CEOs that I have interviewed, will say it's just a matter of business now. We don't even think of it twice. When we have openings, we demand a diverse slate from our search partners or whomever we're working with.
Which is a good thing, because you don't get diversity of thought by having all of the same look, type, style of people in the room. So that is a wonderful and a wise thing. And you've been championing this not just from that direction of trying to bring board candidates, but also through some of, I'm going to call it your spare time, maybe your nights and weekend stuff. So maybe you can also set this up for us on the other side. So there's the Women's Forum of New York, and you're part of the Corporate Board Initiative. And I know you've also been spearheading their Breakfast of Corporate Champions. Can you set the scene for us on that?
So, right. So this is such a wonderful thing. So when I was president of the Women's Forum in 2011, and I reluctantly agreed to do this because my search business wasn't so established back then. I was 11 years into it, but I was still building it. And so I said, okay, I'll take this on, but I want to do something that's going to make a difference, right? So I said, how can we get more companies to get more women into the C-suite, into the boardroom? And I'd spoken with Eileen Lang, who was then head of Catalyst, and I said, Eileen, how are the numbers looking for women on boards and in the C-suite? And she said, not that great. I said, okay, well, you do your catalyst dinner where you honor some companies. I said, how about if we honor, the Fortune 1000, the S&P 500, and really, for those at that time, the number was like 16% women on boards. And I said, let's, honor those that are at 20%. So we did what we call the Breakfast of Corporate Champions in 2011, and we honored those that were 20% or higher. And we started that, which would be a biennial event, and we've done it ever since, every 2 years. And this year will be our 5th biennial event, and we will honor 325 companies that are at 30% or more. And I'm really pleased that this year it's going to be, there's actually a big increase in terms of the numbers we thought would be lower at 30%, because I ran the numbers as of 12/31/2018, and it was a much lower number, and it jumped up when I ran them again May 2019. It jumped up to 323 companies. It had been at like 245 at the end of the 2018. It jumped from 245 up to 323 as of May of this year. And we also look at the numbers that are at 40% or more women on their boards, and it had been at like 56 companies. It jumped up to 91. So we're seeing that companies are increasing the number from, 30% is increased and 40%. Now, we're still not there, meaning we still need to do a lot more work. Fortune 1000, we should have more than 90 companies that have 40% or more in the 1,000, but it's increasing. So when you honor companies, they like to be honored, and then they put out press releases about being honored by the Women's Forum of New York. Right. We convene over 600 executives at Cipriani 42nd Street in New York City.
Which is a beautiful venue.
And we have panels which will include Michael Corbett of Citigroup, Hubert Joly of Best Buy, who just stepped down as the CEO and promoted a female. We have Larry Merlo of CBS. We have Maggie Wilderotter. We have Meg Whitman. We have Pat Russo. We have Brian Moynihan. So we have this wonderful lineup of CEOs, and we have great network moderators. And this is every year we do this. We've had Larry Fink. We've had Ken Frazier. So we have major CEOs of the S&P 500. They convene. They talk about the business imperative. They sponsor women for boards. And, there's no other event that gets over 600 executives together and speaks about this business imperative. So we're very pleased about this.
So that is fabulous and a wonderful job at raising the awareness of the issue, which is a great thing. But let's talk about this as sort of the two sides, right? You got the supply and the demand. So now if you're increasing the demand of people saying, yes, I want these candidates, that's great. Let's talk about the other side, right? So pretend you're doing a search for whatever the company is, and they've been told to get at least half of the slate to be diverse candidates. And historically, if we generalize here, men are probably a little bit better about being more out there and more aggressive in terms of this is what they want and pursuing it. Women are often more sort of heads down, just doing their work, doing great, not promoting themselves as well. How are you going about finding the right candidates and perhaps, and sometimes maybe even talking them into saying, yes, you're ready for this. We should put you forward.
Well, women need to be part of the network, right? And that's why they need sponsorship. CEOs need to sponsor women that they know, that they have seen in the boardroom setting, and they need to put them into various databases that are out there. One is the Women's Forum database, where it's free of charge. People, nom-gov committee chairs can tap into it. Just have to go to our database and search firms as well. But I think more importantly is that CEOs need to pick up the phone and call each other and say, Charlie, I've got a great female, highly qualified. She's my chief auditor. She's my head of one of my business units. She runs a $2 billion, division. She's my CMO with, she's my chief digital officer. They need to pick up the phone and make sure that individual is known. Because I always say that it's not who you know, it's who knows you.
Right. And I always feel like you have to help your network help you, right? So if people don't know that you want to be in a board role, they can't do anything for you anyway. So for someone in our audience who's listening going, I think I might want to do this in the future, next year, next month, whatever it might be. So clearly one of the paths you're saying is be excellent in your job and then make sure your superiors, especially your CEO, is aware of it, right? What would be the next step that you would advocate someone doing? How do they continue to raise their profile?
So I think, Alexander, you're raising really good points. I do monthly calls with women who want to get on the board, and I send out a package to them. And I do say, be part of the NACD. They have wonderful lunches and breakfasts and what have you, and you can rub elbows with people who are on boards. That's a great way of getting educated. Your external visibility, publish, speak, be a thought leader. Look at your media presence. Do you have a YouTube presence? Make sure it's good. Your LinkedIn presence, I think that's important, to be a positive one. Get involved in large not-for-profits. I say large because oftentimes you'll be rubbing elbows again with influential people who can be helpful to you. It also shows that you are civically giving back, and I think that's a major piece of who you are as a person. You can also be on private equity boards or private company boards. And what you just mentioned earlier, let it be known. You have a network there, your professional associations, your colleges or universities. You've got a big network out there. So let it be known to people. Don't let it be a secret. So that networking, your own board of directors in the company in which you work at, let it be known to them. Be, again, sponsored by your CEO. Get into those databases. And then what is your brand? What do you stand for? What are you an expert? You can't be an expert at everything, but, make sure that you are known for something, whether it be cybersecurity, a financial expert, a great marketing person, and have an impressive bio. Don't make people work to see what you're all about. And, people who are on boards can really be very helpful to you in terms of showing and helping you sell yourself and position yourself.
You just covered so much there, Janice. That was an impressive list. I think that was basically the cheat sheet that someone would want to take away from this. And let's unpack that a little bit, right? So NACD, we covered that very quickly. So we had an episode number 24 where Peter Gleason, who's the CEO of NACD, on there, and they have sort of, if you think of basically the NFL footprint, all of those major cities, all of them and more other cities have chapters where you can go and be involved. They've got a national summit down in D.C. once a year in September where there will be probably 1,000 different directors down there that you could network to an extreme, see about anything you'd want to an extreme. And that's one great example. Another way you went is nonprofits. And I'd love to unpack this from your executive search firm perspective. So you and I were talking before this about the YMCA. So I know you were involved in the New York chapter. Now you're involved in the national organization. I'm involved in the location up here near Boston as well. That is an organization with scope and scale that people recognize. They know it's sophisticated. So you talked about large national nonprofits, but to be clear, they're just like there are with a range of companies of size and complexity. There are smaller nonprofits, your local, maybe a regional. Tell us your perspective if you see those side by side on a resume. Do you equate them equally? Do you think one is a stepping stone to another, or I just discount the small ones?
No, I think it depends upon the area of the country that you live in, and you can have some very influential people on some smaller regionals. Red Cross has some smaller regionals, that can have some very influential people. It depends upon where you live. I'm just saying size does matter. Because it depends upon who. You have to look at who's on the board, who can be helpful to you. But the not-for-profit has to resonate with you, just like a for-profit has to resonate with you. Never go on a board that, if minerals and mining is not a corporate board you want to be on, don't go on it.
Right.
You have to enjoy the people, the product, and the services, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with the individuals and with that company, whether it be a for-profit or a not-for-profit. But I'm just saying the not-for-profit can introduce you to some very helpful, influential people that can help you get onto a for-profit down the road. Doesn't guarantee it. It just can be helpful. But plus it shows you're giving back to the community. It says something about you as a person.
Right.
No, I never discount that. In fact, I look for people who are giving back. I think kindness is good and giving back is good. Everybody should do that, right? I mean,
absolutely.
We're all, to give back is a privilege.
And I also look at it as ways perhaps to round out some skill sets that might be perhaps missing from a profile otherwise. And the way I think about it is anything you do in addition to your day job and your family life is going to take some more time and effort from you. So find something that you're passionate about. If you really believe in it, you will bring your best self. You'll have better results. It will just magically make the networking better as opposed to perhaps being a task list you think you're supposed to do just to get your improved candidacy.
Absolutely. I chaired the YMCA board of New York City. I learned a lot about corporate governance, and I followed the global CEO of Accenture, who had been the chair of this board in New York City before me, and he never missed a meeting. So I never had a chance to practice. Yeah, great experience. Great experience.
Well, when I think about what you're describing, right, so you're working with two different sides of the opportunities, but clearly your goal is to give back and educate and prepare others to move forward. I'd love to hear a little bit about your own podcast. So Leadership Reimagined, you've got monthly episodes with fabulous executives and unpacking great stories, so much education coming out of that. Maybe you just give us a minute or two advert about how that started and what your vision is for that, because I'm sure that'll be interesting to some of our audience.
Right. Thank you. So, it started this year. It's Leadership Reimagined, Game-Changing Conversations. And I wanted to talk to leaders who really were looking at how they were leading their companies, their organizations in new and different ways. And some that I'm going to be having coming up, it's even in the medical profession, how they're looking at delivering in the medical area in a different way. But the one I just did was in insurance and making insurance exciting, and in finance, how to level the playing field for how women can invest and have not be pack ladies later on and have a retirement, and just really looking at life differently and making the planet better. And I just finished reading, and I'd love to be interviewing Melinda Gates, but the moment of lift.
Sure.
I just think that this planet needs new leadership, and there are positions down the road in the future we don't even know what they're going to be. So I'm so interested in speaking to individuals who are really reimagining what this world is going to be like down the road. And so I wanted to actually make myself more relevant, my firm more relevant, by talking to individuals who were really reimagining their own organizations and companies in the for-profit and the not-for-profit. And, we all learn by speaking with others. And so that's why I did it. And it's so exciting to hear what other people are doing. But yes, I would love to have the opportunity to speak to Melinda Gates. I think what she's doing and speaking about the world and how can we lift other people up. Right.
Well, let's take that topic and run with it for a second. So as we look forward, right, so we've talked about a huge amount of change, say, in the about 20 years you've been running your company in terms of how boards are thinking about filling seats. Clearly, the boardroom is going to be changing in the future. There's more coming down the line. We've talked about, technology is going to be changing things, for example. What do you envision as the future of the boardroom, both when you're perhaps talking to people who are looking to fill a role, and perhaps you're giving them feedback about make sure you're thinking about these sorts of skill sets, but also people that you're coaching on getting opportunities to make sure you're being prepared in these sort of areas? How do you envision the future of the boardroom?
It's such a good question. So boardrooms, I think the conversations in boardrooms are going to change so much because they're going to have to even have longer conversations because the jobs of tomorrow aren't even known yet, right? So robotics and AI, and it's going to change so many jobs. So boardroom directors are going to have to talk longer about what's around the corner. What are we going to be doing? Strategically, where are we going to be going? And companies that are on the S&P 500 today are not even going to be there, right? So you don't want to be the company that's going to be gone. So who will you have to merge with? Who will you have to, how will you have to change? So the conversations will require even more diversity in the boardroom, different age groups, different backgrounds, people totally out of the sector. Maybe, you're not in the insurance arena at all. You're really in media. You come from a totally different background, so you can have a totally different conversation. So I think the boardrooms are in for best athletes from different sectors, and it's going to be a whole new dynamic going on, different conversations, so that they really stay relevant, and the company could be into totally different businesses, but the conversations are going to be probably take longer, and people are going to be disagreeing with each other more, and it's going to take a totally different dynamic. So I think the boardroom is going to be very different.
Well, I suppose one simple example of that is just think about, say, from 20 years ago versus now, how board packs are created, right? So it used to be for your quarterly meeting, you'd have 1,000 pages that would show up in the mail for you to read. Now you're pulling up your iPad and you've got something there. So that's just a small example of the way things will be radically different. Yes.
But I think the conversation has been more like, I remember boardroom meetings in the past where everybody went to Harvard, everybody had a finance background, everybody kind of agreed with one another, and we just went forward and we bought that company. And it's not going to be like that. It just isn't going to happen. And it's going to be a much more dynamic conversation where they're going to take different points of view and massage those more, and maybe they will go in totally different directions and have more joint ventures. So the boardroom dynamics are going to change, and the boardroom is going to be very different. And it could be smaller boards, bigger boards, joint venture boards, but I think we're going to see certainly people from much different backgrounds or best athletes, and maybe boards saying, don't even look at my sector at all. Just give me, best athletes is the best way I could say it now.
Yeah. And I think there is an increasing understanding that diversity means so many different things, a global perspective, socioeconomic background. There was a previous guest, Gordon Hall, who is the lead independent director for one company and chairman of another board. And he said that I insist that one of my directors is always brand new, is a first-time director, because I know that they will read every single page in full detail multiple times, and they will raise questions that the rest of us who's read them before and just look at the changes won't think of. So I think there's more of a recognition of people saying, yes, we want different perspectives and thoughts.
Well, yes, and the increase is like, I think near 40% of the directors last year were first-time directors.
Right, which was
fabulous.
So
its increase is the highest. It's the highest ever, yep.
And another part of that, and hopefully you can comment on this from the two different perspectives you have, is there's also a recognition about overboarding and as a major problem. So whether it's the activists saying, let's look at this candidate slate very carefully, we don't want them to have too many different boards, which is interesting contrast to some of our audience who are thinking, you know what, the future of my career, I'm just going to have 4 or 5 paid board roles. It's going to be great money and life is going to be really good. Not only is that really hard and ridiculous amounts of time, it's not necessarily realistic. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, overboarding is going to be a thing of the past. You cannot do it, and I do think it's going to be new names, new backgrounds, less boards, and the people are going to be younger. It's like 30% of board directors are over 70 years of age. Now, I think you need multi-generational on boards. I think all for that, but you can't have a preponderance of people in one age group, not in this day and age of such the technology that we have. So, again, it's going to be a great mixture.
Well, Janice, I'm amazed how much we have covered in a half an hour. And I think we're spot on in agreement about the importance of board diversity. And I'm thrilled by the hard work that you've been doing and the progress that we're seeing pay off. And I'm sure some of our audience is going to want to know more about the Breakfast of Champions or the monthly calls that you do. And we can have links to those in the show notes. But if someone wanted to follow up and contact you, how would you recommend they be in touch?
Well, my website is www.elliggroup.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. And the Breakfast of Corporate Champions is November 7th, 2019. And the Women's Forum is womensforumny.org. And you can find the whole program on that website. And I'm happy to send anybody that I raced through how to get more visibility. I'm happy to send my little package out to anybody who wants to really focus on getting on a board more. And again, it's not who you know, but who knows you, and to promote yourself further. I'm happy to send out packages to them. So this has been really delightful. I love what you're doing. I'm following your podcast, Alexander. They're very helpful, and I learn also from you what you're doing. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Janice. We were delighted to have you on the show today, and we appreciate your insights in helping all of our audience to be more boardroom bound.
Thank you. And again, I think boards are doing a great job, and I think we just have to move the needle a little bit further to get to parity for gender and diversity overall by 2025, and I think we can move the needle, and you're helping to do that. So thank you very much.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Janice Ellig. It was wonderful to hear her experience of being the leading executive search firm in getting diverse board candidates successfully placed on the boards. And she talked about both sides. She's working for the companies to fill those board seats, trying to find the right candidates, but she's also someone who coaches, guides, and mentors women about how to find those right opportunities. She has a monthly call, and she's also the founder of the Women's Forum of New York, their corporate board initiative, and its signature event, the biennial Breakfast of Corporate Champions, coming up this year on November the 7th, honoring the companies who have been doing the great work to being committed to board diversity, and really excited that it's 325 companies this year. I know there's more room to do, but this is a great achievement. This is seeing progress in the right direction. And the lineup of people who are going to be there is incredible. So if you're New York or around there, you're going to want to go check that out. And one quick special announcement before we wrap up today. I'm excited to share that I will be speaking at the Sound Education Conference. This is an annual event hosted at Harvard in Boston. And this year on Saturday, October 12th, I will be one of the speakers. This is a conference that celebrates educational audio. And you will find some of the smartest and most engaging voices in podcasting there. It's a great chance to meet them. Honored to be able to participate in that as well. And I'll be talking about, of course, the Boardroom Bound podcast and what we talk about on this show in terms of why boards are an amazing opportunity, how people position themselves for it. Basically, it's how do you share different topics, the information, and get them out to listeners in the most efficient and effective way. And hopefully it will give me a great opportunity to connect with some of you dear listeners in person. I hope to see you at the event. Remember to head over to podcast.gordon.edu, where you can get links to all of today's resources. And perhaps most important, the Boardroom Bound team and I are just so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content we bring to you every Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.